Hello everybody, welcome to the talk, Adopting Agile. My name is Mike Kottmeyer. I'm a product consultant and trainer for version 1. I joined version 1 about a year and a half ago. Prior to working for version 1, I was a senior project manager for CheckFree Corporation. When I was at CheckFree, I managed a large portfolio of projects for their online banking and bill payment division. I come from a traditional project management background. I am a PMP certified project manager, and I'm also a certified Scrum Master. I've served on the board of APLN, and I helped create the DSDM Agile Project Leadership Certification. I'm also a founding member of the Lean Software and Systems Consortium. When not working with clients, I like to write and speak on topics related to project management, and I blog at blog.version1.net and www.leadingagile.com. Let me tell you a little bit about why I put this presentation together. One of the nice things about working for version 1 is that I get to talk with a bunch of people that are adopting Agile and doing Agile in various different kinds of environments. I'm usually only on site with my clients for a couple days at a time. And over the past year, I've gotten to talk with 30 or more clients, again, at various levels of Agile adoption. There's been small clients, there's been large clients, and even a couple of really, really big clients. Almost universally, what I find that these organizations are struggling with the idea of building teams. Teams are so foundational to Agile that if you don't understand them, that if you're not able to build them out correctly, you've really failed with your Agile adoption efforts before you really even get started. The ideal Agile team is a pretty specific concept that's worth spending a few moments to really understand. Agile teams are cross-functional units that have everything that they need to deliver software to their customers. An Agile team usually has one or more developers. They have folks that do testing. This can typically either be automated unit testing or the more traditional kinds of manual testing. I've seen teams that have both, depending upon the kind of product that they're actually delivering. Teams might have a business analyst. This could be a dedicated role or possibly a role that is blended with some other role on the team. Sometimes the BA on the team is actually serving as the customer proxy for the team, maybe proxying for a product manager that actually lives outside the team. Small teams don't typically have a project manager, although I think that there is a place for project management on Agile projects. But often the project managers are coordinating the activities of several teams working on larger initiatives and providing maybe an interface into the external stakeholder community of the overall project. The team usually has a Scrum Master or some sort of Agile process coordinator. Sometimes this person is a dedicated role. Sometimes it's a dedicated role serving multiple teams. Sometimes it's actually another one of the project roles that is wearing multiple hats. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a dedicated role unto itself, but it's a pretty key role on an Agile project. And then last but not least, we have our product owner. The product owner is that single ringable neck. They give the team their marching orders. They define the requirements. They work with the team to define the product, they set the priorities, and they're ultimately responsible for the business outcomes related to the project. That's a very specific way of looking at a team. So a team has all these roles. It's self-contained, it's independent, has everything that it needs to be successful. The problem, and the reason why I think that this topic is so important for teams that are considering adopting Agile, is that most organizations really struggle creating this kind of a team. Most organizations think of teams in a very different way. Rather than building teams around business outcomes, though the working software we talk about so much in Agile, we build teams around groups of people that do similar work. We might have one team of Java developers, maybe a team of COBOL programmers, maybe a team of database engineers or analysts. We have dedicated groups of folks that are responsible for testing the applications that the developers build. We have a group of business analysts, and all the business analysts, of course, report to a manager of business analysts. We put all the project managers into a single group, traditionally like a project management organization or a PMO. And all of our product owners are not part of the team. They're actually in a group unto themselves and sometimes part of the business and only really loosely connected with the development teams. So when it comes time to start thinking about doing project work, We think about the requirements that are defined by the business, and we pull people out of these various resource silos, and we construct project teams. These teams don't typically stay together. Sometimes they hardly even actually work together. They manage work by writing documents and specifications and handing off large batches of work between these functional silos. Because each team is responsible for optimizing its particular function, we get really, really good at writing code. We get good at doing QA, and we get really good at writing project plans and charter documents. But often what we don't usually get really, really good at is working together to deliver working software. In reality, oftentimes the exact opposite happens. What we usually get is we get slower delivery. We start building walls between teams, and we start creating environments that cause ourselves to protect ourselves from the very people that we need to be partnering with. Because we're not focused on delivering value, we're more focused on optimizing our particular skill set within the overall process. We start to pay attention at getting better at being a QA person or getting better at being a business analyst. We start thinking about developing specialized skills and making sure that everyone is busy or fully utilized all the time. And we time slice people across multiple projects. When we focus on people getting work done within one particular function, we start to think about because we are not focused on delivering value, because we are focused on optimizing our particular silos, we tend to pay attention to getting better within our silos rather than getting better at delivering software. We think about developing specialized skills and making sure that everyone is busy all the time. We time slice people across multiple projects and create very, very complex project portfolios. We focus on when people are going to be done with a particular task in one function so we can move them on to other projects. There's little attention delivering the software that our customers actually want. And if something has to change, it's extremely difficult to go back because folks have already moved on to the next initiative. If we slip a schedule, that change has to cascade through the entire project portfolio, and it makes our overall portfolio very unstable and very difficult to manage. In effect, we're creating an extremely complex network of dependencies that, again, is just extremely difficult to manage. I've worked under maybe 5 or 6 different PMOs in my time, and I've never seen one of them manage this problem very effectively. But this is where most organizations find themselves when they decide to go down this path of Agile adoption. So where does a company like this start? How do they go from this siloed business model, from this complex network of dependencies, to a loosely coupled network of independent Agile teams? I hope it goes without saying that this is just not a trivial problem. Pulling apart the project organization, really pulling apart the development organization, is similar to the problem that architects face when trying to create a loosely coupled, highly cohesive set of services out of a tightly coupled, low cohesion legacy system. You have to look for services that you can pull out one at a time and in effect build a new system in parallel that works together with the old system until the old system can be decommissioned. There's a bunch of ways that we can consider doing this, but since our goal is to have an Agile organization, we want the value, the transparency, and the trust, all that soft human side of Agile. We start building the Agile organization by identifying the right pieces to pull out. We want to look for those pieces which we can identify and start to form Agile teams around. So this little circle is my symbol for an Agile team. So the large yellow part represents the team members. The blue dot represents the product owner, or maybe the business representative, or even maybe more generally a team leader, or even possibly a manager, somebody who's responsible for giving guidance to that particular team. They're kind of the interface with the team in the broader organization. So here we have a team. It's our Agile team. And if we go through the Agile literature, it's almost universally tells us that teams are responsible for building features. Features are thin slices of software that are valuable to the business. So for example, we might want to be able to log into our system. We might want the ability to be able to make a payment. We might want the ability to be able to cancel a payment or change its amount. These are requirements that are small and self-contained, and they span the entire software architecture and deliver value back to the business. So this approach is great for small teams, for smaller organizations. It reduces the dependencies and allows the teams to focus on building that end-to-end slice without being dependent upon the rest of the organization for delivering anything. But the problem is that in some organizations, this guidance doesn't hold. And this is important to understand because when teams consider adopting Agile, some of the barriers that they get into is when they try to create these small cross-functional teams in an environment that's not really conducive to a small team that builds end-to-end features. So in some organizations, at some level of scale, you actually can't create a team around a single feature. The largest program that I ever ran probably had about 17 different component teams. So in that environment, I'd actually have to have a team of 17 people to build an end-to-end cross-section of the architecture. And so in some environments, this approach just isn't going to work. So if our overall software architecture has large components, and these components have to integrate to be able to deliver end-to-end business value, some teams have actually taken the approach of organizing our Agile teams around the idea of component teams. So the component teams define their value to the business a little bit differently than the feature teams. So they basically define their value in the sense of being able to provide a service back to other components or to other elements within the business. And the actual end-to-end business value is derived by integrating these components with each other to actually deliver something that is of value to the actual customer. So kind of closely related to this idea of component teams is the idea of a services team. So if you're building an organization around maybe like a services-oriented architecture, you might want to consider thinking about building Agile teams around services or collections of services. So just like with the component team, the services will be integrated to deliver the overall end-to-end business value, working features, working software back to the business. So the general idea is that insisting on the Agile team being a cross-functional group of people working on an end-to-end business feature guided by a single product owner is somewhat limiting in the enterprise when you start thinking about adopting Agile across larger, more complex projects. So it's a rule that works with small teams, and it's certainly the place that I start when I'm working with an organization and trying to find ways of helping them understand how to build teams. But that rule needs adaptation when you try to solve more complex problems. So in essence, you might have an organization that includes feature teams, component teams, services teams, and these teams are organized around the capabilities of the organization. And what we learned is that teams are the elemental units that deliver value back to the business, however that business value might actually be defined. So determining what capabilities then to start with and deciding how to coordinate several capabilities to deliver our complex business objectives and defining how those teams are going to interface and interact with each other and with the legacy organization is really the problem that we're trying to solve when we talk about adapting Agile in a meaningful way across a larger organization or a larger enterprise. When we start thinking about teams delivering capabilities, it becomes the responsibility of the larger organization to provide the teams with the right stuff to work on, in the right order, and with the right level of specificity such that they can produce the valuable outcomes that the business is expecting. So Scrum assigns this responsibility to the product owner. And that's fine again in a small environment. But many mid-sized organizations are redefining the product owner role and assigning it to a team of people. Sometimes, especially in larger organizations, the role is actually too big for a single person. So let's move now to project portfolios. Once we've learned how to do single projects with multiple teams, the organization needs to get good at learning how to manage multiple projects or project portfolios through Agile capability teams. When you start thinking about scheduling projects through capability teams, it's really unlikely that every project is going to impact every capability in exactly the same way. More often than not, one team is going to have the lion's share of work, and the other teams are going to be required only part of the time when delivering the initiative. What most organizations do, because they're still focused on keeping the teams busy, they're still focused on optimizing the utilization of the individual, they get started on the next project. It doesn't matter that the first capability, in this case C1, is not ready to start on the next project. The thought is that the teams C2 and C3 will go ahead and get ahead of the game. That can be okay if there's minimal risk that something's going to change. But more likely, though, when C1 comes online, we're going to learn new things that invalidate the work of the first two teams. Also, as the teams work ahead of each other, they're in effect solving different problems at different times. This is analogous to the requirements team getting ahead of the game by getting all of the user stories fully defined before the team is ready to build them. We understand this lesson with teams and requirements. We need to learn it across teams as well. So you see the pattern here. Whenever teams have space in their schedule, they fill it with work on the next highest value project. This one thing really introduces a lot of dysfunction into the organization. It drives a greater need for upfront documentation, even with Agile teams. It causes us to be working out of sync with each other, and it causes us to focus on our team's issues rather than the overall delivery of value to the organization. And somewhat counterintuitively, it actually causes us to take longer delivering projects to the business. Think about this simple example. If we have 3 projects in queue and each is planned to take 3 months, if we work on them all one at a time, we deliver the first one in 3 months, we deliver the second one in 6 months, and we deliver the third one in 9 months. When we interleave the project, this delays the overall value delivery. Our first project doesn't get delivered for 7 months, 4 full months later than if we had focused all of our attention on the highest priority initiative. Maybe the next project comes in a month later, but chances are it delivers even later than 8 months. Constant context switching causes the overall performance of the system to go down. It might actually take us 10 or 12 months. The third one might come in at 9 months, but again, probably much later because of the delays and lack of focus on our highest priority initiatives. There's a pretty good chance that the business gets impatient. Our priorities have changed enough that Project B and Project C actually get killed because they took too long to deliver a return back to the business. So how do you solve this problem? You recognize that component 1 is your primary constraint. To use more traditional language, component 1 is your critical path. So rather than filling the empty spaces in C2 and C3's schedules, what we want to do is we want to focus resources and attention on making C1 go faster. This can mean pulling folks from C2 and C3 to help C1, or it can mean building a 4th team to help C1's product backlog. I would rather have C2 and C3 actually sit idle than to accept the risk of building product that I won't need and getting the overall system out of sync with delivering value. So however it works for your organization, the idea is that we need to elevate C1 as the constraint within the organization and do whatever it takes to pull in their timeline, to increase their velocity, and then ultimately what that will do is that will take all of the slack time out of C2 and C3. So now we can start the next project as a team all at the same time. And when that's done, we can start the third. So what you'll notice that there's still some slack time in the schedule, and that's fine. The organization needs some slack time and it needs some contingency. So we can either fill that time with projects that go a little bit long, or we can fill it with things like refactoring, paying down technical debt, doing operational work or training, or maybe even some PTO. At this level of Agile adoption, what we learn is that enterprises build teams around capabilities, and that enterprise deliverables are the result of coordinating many capabilities across a much larger value stream. Just like Agile teams remove the focus from the individual and try to optimize the overall performance of the team, Agile enterprises think less about keeping teams busy and more on identifying and elevating constraints. Focusing limited resources on constrained teams is the best way to deliver value faster back to the business. We want to create a culture, and it is a culture that values finishing project work rather than starting project work. There's lots of incentives for getting work started. We need to keep people busy. We might be building our own personal empire. We might be growing our organizations. But all of that doesn't necessarily deliver value back to the business. We need to actually start less work and finish more work. Identifying, improving, and approving smaller projects increases the flow of value through the enterprise. Very similarly to why we have teams build small requirements. To this point, we've been focusing largely on the product delivery organization. We've been looking at the flow of value from the PMO to the project teams, the product owner teams, and ultimately down to the capability teams that are the building blocks of our Agile organization. We've proposed a model that allows the business to make decisions about enterprise architecture and high-level requirements. These decisions become constraints that limit the decision-making ability of the lower-level teams. The product owner team, maybe even a product owner team with architects, is defining the solution at the next level down. They are taking the constraints imposed by the business and creatively devising solutions that can be implemented by the component teams. The product owner team focuses on solutions architectures and lower level requirements. These constraints are received by the capability teams and realized through detailed design, user stories, and working software. Building teams around capabilities, throttling work through at the right time, and coordinating across teams all allow the business to make reasonably accurate, directionally correct commitments, the right high-level decisions without the direct involvement of the capability teams. The business knows and trusts their output and is able to predict their ability to deliver. The business gives guidance, establishes appropriate constraints through architecture and requirement decisions down to the organizations. Higher level teams make only the decisions that have to be made at the higher level. Lower level teams are empowered to make decisions about how to implement the solutions within the constraints imposed by the higher level teams. When those constraints cannot be honored or they limit the capability teams in an inappropriate way, the team gives feedback up the team hierarchy. Teams try to resolve issues at the team level, but if they can't, they escalate to the coordinating teams, the product owner team. When constraints cannot be honored at the product owner team, they get escalated up into the PMO or the higher order teams, the product organization, or even the enterprise architecture teams. So guidance comes down the organization and feedback goes back up. At some point, teams will get so good at building software and optimizing the flow of value across the organization that the development teams will not be the constraint. It won't make sense to build product any faster because the business and the customers won't be able to consume it as fast as the development organization is able to build it. The constraint will actually move outside and into the business and into their ability to decide what to build. It might move into possibly marketing or sales. It might move downstream into the accounting organization or to support or to the physical infrastructure team. We can think about organizational capabilities outside of product delivery now. We can maybe even build Agile teams around capabilities that exist outside the development organization. Once development is no longer the constraint, as a business, we have to start focusing attention on what is limiting our ability to deliver value back to the business, regardless of where that constraint lives within the business. At the enterprise level of adoption, we learn that the business has to be in a position to establish direction, to establish constraints, and trust the organization to deliver within those constraints. The teams have to give feedback up the chain when they've hit the limits of those constraints. It's a partnership between the business and the technology organization that helps all of us converge on the right solutions to deliver the most value to our customers. It's not just the technology organization that is made up of capabilities, it's the business too. We need to understand those capabilities that are upstream and downstream from the technology organization and impacting our ability to deliver value back to our actual customers. Our goal has never been to actually adopt Agile or to adopt Scrum or really even to build software better or faster. Our goal is actually to improve value creation for our customers and ultimately ROI for the business. Unlocking value delivery comes from targeted investment in those areas that are constraining our ability to create value. So thinking about capabilities gives us a language for helping the organization begin the process of untangling the project portfolio, untangling our ability to deliver. Our portfolios are making it nearly impossible to make investment decisions, to get ROI, to be responsive to our markets, or to change direction, and again, to deliver value to our customers. Because we desire to be an agile organization, we start with the idea of teams. Next, we make decisions about what these teams are going to be organized around. For a software organization, it could be features or components or services. For the business, it could be investment decisioning or invoice processing or customer support. We define what these capabilities are going to work on, what their backlogs look like, how that backlog is going to be prioritized, and how it relates to the other parts of the overall organizational value stream. Next, we assign that work and we sequence it for the fastest value creation possible. And then we focus our improvement efforts on optimizing those capabilities that slow down our ability to deliver value. So optimizing constraints is really the key, both at the team level and at the organizational level. Investing in partially completed projects is not a great way to spend our limited resources. Investing in those teams that constrain value delivery is the best way to get better at delivering value back to the business and ultimately to our customers. So, what do you think? Are we on the right track? Do you guys have any comments? Do you have any questions? Please feel free to comment, to contact me directly. I would love to hear what you think about this. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time and the fact that you spent 40 minutes listening to this talk. The product owner team with architects is a variation of the product owner team. You might need architects or lead developers or team leads when there are technical dependencies that have to be managed across teams. This approach is essential when the capabilities are organized around components or services, but not totally unheard of with feature-based teams either. Just like with the product owner team without architects, the product owner team with architects makes only the decisions that must be made across the teams and defers as many of the decisions as possible to the teams. It's also worth mentioning that these teams are not an ivory tower making decisions in a vacuum. They need to work closely with the capability teams to define and to rapidly validate decisions by building working software. So, let me know what you think. You can get a hold of me by email or by commenting on either my blog at blog.version1.net or at www.leadingagile.com. You can go to both of these blogs to get a little bit more of an idea of what I'm thinking in this particular case. But either way, I appreciate your time and attention, and thank you for joining me for my talk on adopting Agile. Stay tuned for more to come. Have a good day. Bye-bye.